Bob Baker with Jazz Guitar Today. We're here with Steve Howe. Well, this is an honor and a privilege and a pleasure for sure. There's a jillion words written about you. There's videos everywhere. Your history is well documented. Our magazine is called Jazz Guitar Today, and it's really about progressive innovation, improvisation, composition, and all that. So jazz is a catch-all word for us. Yeah. So today is the big deal. What are you doing today?
Well, you know, I keep my hand in, that's for sure, because, you know, in this period, we don't want to talk about the sort of non-period of performance. You know, I've been doing a lot of writing and recording, you know, and produced the album The Quest for Yes. And, you know, so basically, you know, writing and recording and practicing and enjoying the guitar is still a very important thing. In a way, it's more important because you know, of not having the rush of doing the stage shows and keeping my chops in good shape via that route. You know, I've kind of gone back to a thinking of, well, it's up to me, you know, to keep myself sort of playing and fluid and happy, basically, you know, and you know, there's a lot to be said for doing things that make you happy because you do them better. So yeah, I mean, I'll do most probably some recording later, you know, on some things that I'm working on. I'll get guitars out, you know, I'll put some away, you know, I'll think about really how being a guitarist is still very much, you know, a thing with me, and I still love the sound of all the styles of guitar that you can imagine. And I've sort of filtered into all of those as much as I can, you know. So, you know, that's what I'm up to. If I can play any solo piece I've written, you know, From the Mood for a Day, Clap, you know, I've written about 30, 35 pieces like that. And I just test myself to say, oh yeah, that's a nice, I remember that tune. And I start playing it and it comes back, because when I write something, it doesn't require a lot of current momentarily detail to get it into fairly good shape. So that's one way I've kept myself in. But as far as writing new music, that's the most important thing, is to keep wanting to find new things to do and, you know, develop the styles and the kind of solo albums I do. I want to keep that kind of changing, and so that's one aspect.
That's a lot. That's a lot. Yeah. So how has your approach to composition changed over the years, or has it?
It's always been changing. You know, initially, you know, when you're not confident, you haven't had anything released and you're doodling around, you think, oh, that's pretty good, but you know, will I be able to risk playing this to somebody without them saying, oh, that sucks, you know, or I've heard all that before, you know. So I guess that was a challenge that I always wanted to be a writing guitarist. You know, I wanted to write music. In fact, I turned down at least one gig with a band that said, well, we want you to play guitar, but we don't want any, you know, don't bring anything else to the party. And I said, well, sorry, I come with the party. So that's really important to me. And yeah, you asked me an interesting question, because it has changed. I mean, initially, you know, I grappled with a 1/4-inch machine. I think it was a Telefunken, you know, and it kind of went round. The tape went through various sort of, it was all very difficult trying to record myself. Then the cassette player came along in the you know, very late 60s, the recording one with the red button on it, and I was just thrilled. You know, I could record myself jamming and improvising. I'd just like to say that I've never been a practicing guitarist in that sense. I've always been improvising, so I'd rather sit down and just improvise on the guitar than you know, do that studious kind of thing of doing scales. Now, over the years, I've found that does help to keep your, you know, fingers moving around and all your familiarity with the fingerboard. But moving on from the cassette player, so there was the cassette, you know, and that's what John Anderson and I wrote, like Roundabout and Close to the Edge on. That kind of level of home recording was just really fundamental. But as things moved on, yeah, I got more interested as Les Paul had started the ball rolling, not only in a sort of jazz tinge guitar, but also in the multi-tracking. So yeah, I mean, in the 80s, I bought an 8-track tape machine, you know, and then I guess in the 90s, I moved on cautiously, you know, to an ADAT, you know, with 8 tracks. And basically, you know, I love Pro Tools. You know, I love being able to mess around with Pro Tools, but they don't have a lot to do with my writing. Most of my writing is done on acoustic guitar, and I record myself on one of these, you know, some kind of digital voice recorder. You know, you can get hours of nonsense on there, you know, and you can scan through and edit it off, you know. But basically, I've got 3 of these things, and that's the curse of my life because I'm always recording different things. So I pop down ideas now, like I did on a cassette player. So in one way, it's not changed one bit. I compile ideas, and I don't judge them or know what the hell's going to happen to them. And then at some point, I get the time to look through them and think, oh, that's nothing. Oh, that's something. That's a good sequence. That's a good line. That's a good riff, you know. And I start compiling them, and I've got better and better at this. One little trick I do is I list them with the BPMs and the keys, so I know what. So I can look down and go, well, I'm looking for a riff now. Oh, there's a riff in E. I can move it to F, you know. So the key isn't really that much of a problem unless it's got a lot of intrinsic guitar-ness, you know, like it's about the guitar tuning. So those will want to stay. But yeah, compiling them with BPMs means that when I get these moments, which have to be quite a long time, quite a few weeks of researching my little ideas, and they build into what I release, you know. And I demonstrate that in my series called Homebrew, which I'm up to volume 7 now, of how I mess around at home recording stuff, and usually it becomes something else when it's re-recorded. So those early recordings, which very guitaristically demonstrate how I construct my music better, and it turns into something else. So, but I think the other thing to build into that is that as years have gone by, I picked up much more influences from other people and been fascinated. I mean, one of my main guys is Chet Atkins. I mean, really is. I mean, he's central to everything I do. But everybody else is a branch from Chet. And Les Paul was really there before. But what I did just now, I rushed in my record collection, and I listed some of the, you know, primal jazz players that have influenced me, because although I came through in the twangy Ventures, Shadows, Dwayne Eddy era, that was my foothold. You know, at first it was all about these kind of tunes, you know, that were fairly easy to play, but the sound was great. So I got into sound. And that really did affect my choice of guitarists as well in jazz, because a lot of great players, but some of them have the unique sound that goes with it. And if you wanted, I could tell you about them, or maybe we'll come to them as a kind of resource, you know. So I am definitely a post Charlie Christian guitar fan, you know what I mean? I mean, including Charlie Christian, basically. So for me, although I brought one record out of the collection to show you, and this was the very first record I bought.
Oh,
it's a 10-inch by Django Reinhardt, right? And the neighbor in where I lived said to me one day, "Look, I've got this record, I don't want it anymore. You know, you can have it for, you know, $5 bob or something." And I said, "Well, what's it? It's Django Reinhardt. You won't believe it." So, you know, I heard the name and I knew what, you know, there was something about it. So I heard that. I bought it and played it a lot. And I thought, wow, this guitarist, you know, these jazz players, they're so ahead of rock guitarists. It's ridiculous. So what happened was my brother, Philip, who only passed away a couple of years ago, sadly, he influenced me a lot because he was a bit of a jazz boffin, to say the least. And, you know, he liked his Miles Davis and his Dizzy Gillespie and all that. Gil Evans, he introduced me to Chico Hamilton. But through that path, he said to me, "Oh, these guitarists, you know, they're nothing. Even got the jazz guitarist." So what happened was I got the Django record, and then, you know, then I started doing my own sort of research, which led me on to really like Jim Hall and Kenny Burrell. They were a couple of the guys I found pretty early on, and I loved Kenny's sound, you know. And in fact, I played Kenny's sound in my trio. Do da So it was my dream to play this kind of stuff, even like Haunted Melody by Roland Kirk. I always thought I'll never be able to play that tune. I mean, I just don't get it, but I did, you know. So as I've increased my enjoyment for jazz guitarist, then lots of things have opened up. And Barney Kessel was in there in the early days with his Pole Winners series with Shelley Mann and Ray Brown. I mean, that was a beautiful sound. But I found, I mean, I don't really want to broadcast this much, but, you know, I found his sound a bit labored later because Wes Montgomery came along. You know, when Wes came, when I heard Wes, it was like, oh my God, what is going on here? You know, the octaves, the flying around that he did was so beautiful, but the warmth of his sound. And lo and behold, when I was only 16, I'd only been playing 4 years, and I'm sitting in Ronnie Scott's, and this smiling guitarist comes out the dressing room. Everybody's head turned, and he had this radiant smile, radiant. Sat down with, I think, the Stan Tracy trio, and he starts playing. Well, I already had a few of his albums, so I knew what to expect. But Wes is, like Chet, Wes is he's irremovable. You can't erase Wes from my life because he's so important and he's so wonderful. So by the time that's 16, so I'd played 4 years and everybody was talking rock and roll, you know, and I was walking around thinking to myself, I want to get a 175. So when I was 17, just a year later, I got a 175, and people said, "What are you playing? What are you playing that guitar for? You know, it's for jazzers." And I said, "Well, I don't care. You know, I'm going to play rock and roll or anything I want on it." And I found that guitar so versatile that it's never held me back. Although I could come back to that held me back in a second. So what happened? Wes was there, but then I found Tal Farlow. You know, and he was a guy I'd later meet, and he'd said to me, "You're the guy who keeps talking about me all the time." I said, "Yeah, you know, Tal." So Tal's one of those remarkable players, just flies on the guitar. You know, he just, yeah. I mean, I could see why he liked a little fingerboard, you know, on the Birdland, or that kind of a guitar. So Tal was really, but like I said at the very beginning, everybody relates back to Charlie Christian. There is no Wes, Tal, Jimmy, you know, Jim Hall, Kenny Burrell. These guys most probably would have never existed if we hadn't had Charlie Christian. So that is definitely, you know, the way I feel about it. So basically what happened after that was there were Hank Garland, you know, there was other guitars like Howard Roberts and Charlie Bird on the classical guitar. All these guys had some sort of role for me, some sort of excitement, like buying a new guitar. Finding a new guitarist was equally creative and exciting. So what I'd say about more recently in the last 20 years is, of course, a lot of these guys have either retired or some of them have passed on, and that's a great loss. But along came Martin Taylor, you know, from Scotland. You know, and Martin got in touch with me. We met when we were looking at a synth guitar or something. We were both interested in this synth guitar by Yamaha, and we met and we both kind of went, it's a bit of a cricket bat, this thing. But we basically hit it off. And when I released Masquerade, which was in 1990 on the kind of frighteningly difficult album called Union by Yes, there's Arista asked me to contribute a solo. So I played them 3 on a tape, and they picked Masquerade. So I played Masquerade, which is a solo 12-string guitar piece. Well, Martin Taylor said to me sometime after our meeting, he said, "I might like you to produce me, because when I heard Masquerade, I thought, wow, okay, what's that all about? What's that sound, you know?" So basically, I produced his album called Artistry, which I hope has started a lifelong friendship and respect for each other, because since then we've done another album called Together, where we did play together. He features mainly on Masterpiece guitars, but a rare kind of obscure record that came out on P3 Music for a while. Was very exciting development for Martin and I to play together on somebody else's guitars. Scott Chinnery at the time had a collection of 750 guitars. So we basically picked about 50 of them to record on a record called Masterpiece Guitars. And Martin excelled. I mean, he's brilliant on this record. But what I heard in Martin, because he's a great guitarist at playing solo, like Joe Pass, you know, is another great guitarist, particularly fantastic to just play on his own, you know. And Martin started this playing on his own jazz, you know. And for us in Britain, it was such a revelation to have somebody this fine. And I must say that Chet Atkins met him and heard him play and said, there aren't many people who can play like this, you know. So Chet had respect for Martin Taylor too. So basically a guitarist like Martin circulated, you know, he filled the shoes of Diz Disley with Stefan Grappelli when after the, you know, the years of Django, of course, it was a very hard gig to fill, and Diz Disley did it great. And then eventually Martin Taylor did this. But over the years, Martin showed himself to be a very full of breadth musician, basically just the most wonderful person. So I have a lot of love for him and the way that he incorporates, like me, he kind of incorporates the history of the guitar in his playing, you know, and there's almost nothing he can't do. Although when we check notes with each other, you know, I go, "Oh, Martin, when you do those kind of runs, I mean, it just knocks me." Yeah, but he says to me, "Yeah, but when you do that stuff in yes, you know, but it's all I don't know what you're doing." So oddly enough, there's a sort of wall between us with our own parts, you know, and that is what creates wonderful respect. I mean, I'm not going to do a lot of performing about. That was called a Seagull. There you go.
I love it. I love it.
I mean, I'm really a guitar family guy more than any particular kind of guitarist. You know, I might think about the prog guitarist. And I think, well, I don't know. But I mean, I guess the prog guitarist title kind of incorporates anything, you know, I want to do because, you know, I love playing a bit of mandolin. But the steel guitar came in pretty early on as well because before I started playing, I'd heard Speedy West play with Tennessee Ernie Ford, and he had a great guitarist with him, of course, Jimmy Bryant, and those two were a dynamic duo, if ever there was one. And you know, then Santo and Johnny and all these other players came along, and I thought, I want to do that. That is another thing I want, another feather in my cap. So, you know, as the 70s went along, by the time I got to the mid-70s, I played the whole song with Yes on a steel guitar. There's no guitar on it at all. It's all steel guitar, and it's called Going for the One. So, but what that allowed me to do was be much more slippery and bendy and sliding. Wow, you know, that stuff that I couldn't do on a 175. I jumped from Gibson in the mid-70s to Fender, you know, and I started doing albums that featured Fender guitars. Because I'm like that. I want the whole thing. I want all the sounds, you know, I want all the textures. But one of them that is so important to me is definitely the jazz. Take, for instance, Kenny Burrell at the 5 spot live playing Lover Man. I mean, it's unbelievable. You know, what I love about it, he starts the tune and you think, wow, this is slow and soulful and big ballad. And he takes a kind of improvisation break. And after it, you hear one guy realized, just heard genius, you know. So Kenny's a great example. Kenny Burrell is such a great example. I love him so much because of his sound. I mean, his playing, his ideas, his musicality, they're all wonderful. But I think he took care of his sound. And I do advise guitarists this. If sometimes people say, oh, what's the best advice? I said, well, you know, don't just play and record and walk away. You know, make sure that guitar is in the right position, the right EQ, maybe the right treatment, a bit of reverb if it needs it, you know. So look after your sound. And that's why I guess now I consider myself as much a producer as I am a guitarist, because without production, your guitar could sound like a dead bucket in the back of the band. You know what I mean? just something waving about, as opposed to something penetrating and moving, moving the air, so to speak.
You pay attention to your sound live. You really, I mean, the recordings are wonderful, but you really pay attention to the sound of your guitars live. From your nylon string to your Martin to your 175, your 345, even your telly when you're playing that. I mean, everything is spot on, as they say, in terms of the tone.
Yeah. Well, it has to be. That's that thing I just said. Look after it. Don't just play and walk away, but play and be there to kind of steer it, because part of the effect of the guitar can, well, not the whole effect of the guitar, can radically change if it's hard to hear. If it's lost in the mix. Actually, that's a primary thing. Yeah, I mean, I'd almost call it a kind of duty, to yourself to not only get a good sound to start with. That's still not the easiest thing in the world, but with more experience, it gets a little bit easier. But, in the early days, it was a lot harder. I mean, I know drum sounds are notorious, in the early years, for an engineer, could take a whole day to get a drum sound, let alone. But basically, to piece that together with the band and take some care over the guitar. This is what's great about overdubbing, I guess, is that there is only one thing you're doing. You're doing this guitar. And that is a focus I started to use straight away, when I made my first record with the producer, Joe Meek. We did a record and he said, well, do a guitar solo on top. I said, yeah, I'm up for that. So that kind of opportunity to move the recording on by overdubbing. I know that's not really a very jazz like professional kind of thing, do overdub, but in a way there's horses for courses. There's times in music when you've just got to have more option.
My friend Scott Henderson, fusion jazz guitarist, he says, well, some people make movies and some people do live theater.
I mean, live is another trade to learn, believe me, and usually you learn them simultaneously, or maybe live is the first thing you do. It certainly was with me. I mean, I'd done some legwork or stomping the boards on a stage before I got in a studio, so I did have an idea that there was something about the both of them. They're both kind of equal. They're both equally creative in their different ways, and they're both equally needed. You need to learn both trades. It isn't just be a guitarist or just be a live guitarist. You have to learn about them.
You exemplify the word eclectic. I mean, that's what you're talking about. I mean, the whole Chet thing is so obvious, and then you got the organ trio with your son. I mean, where you're playing the Kenny thing, and then, the whole, obviously, yes, it's not, and all the other things you've done, I don't know of another guitar player on the planet that's as eclectic as you are and willing to perform that stuff. So there you are in a concert and, ladies and gentlemen, Steve Howe solo, and you pop out with your acoustic guitar and play a demanding piece. There's two words for this. It's either courage or confidence.
What I like about that thread you've just started is that for a long time, certainly in the 60s and the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, there was a culture, if you like, about going on stage, that the culture was get in the headspace you need to be in. You know what I mean? Now, I mean, I work with just loads of musicians, and some of them would have half a bottle of brandy before they went on. Some of them, wanted to smoke this, they wanted to take that, and that's a kind of mixed up, crazy way of doing it. But it was the way, and quite often, yes, we go on stage and everybody's on some different kind of high. And yet, when we started playing, the rules were get on with it, do the show, and that's what we did. But come 2001, I'd been meditating for, I don't want to big this up, but since about 82, 83, I'd been meditating. And I suddenly thought, I've been doing this a while now, and I think I could safely give up all that, all that getting yourself out of it and actually get myself into it, And the most amazing thing happened in that tour of 2001 with Yes. People were coming to me going, "Oh my God, I thought you had been playing well, but Steve, you're playing great." So that was the feedback that inspired me never to go on anything other than totally clear and straight, because I was one of the only guys in the band who really knew what was going on. I stopped the whole thing. I stopped having fun. I mean, if people are paying to see you, they ought to see the best of you, and after, you can get as wrecked as you like if that's what your thing is. You can get out of it, but you shouldn't be out of it when you're on the stage. That's the time to be clear. The way that you present yourself, I think Yehudi Menyon always put this in my mind, the back of my mind. It took me some years to come round to it, because he was quite famous for lying down in the interval and then doing some more meditation. In his book about his life, that was part of his story, that he found that meditation was part of the musical sphere. So, I do that, and basically I find that preparation, but I still like an hour. It doesn't take an hour to do that, but somewhere in that hour is the meditation. But also I like to get everybody out of my way, out of my hair. I don't want to hear about money, questions, problems, somebody's not here, somebody's over there. So basically I design, and I've got myself in the position where I can say, okay, I'm going to close this door at 7 o'clock. And that's it. I don't see anybody till 8 o'clock. And in that hour, I get my clothes ready. I sit down, I have a bit of a drink, a cup of tea or something. And basically, then I do some relaxation. And then I did a few exercises, stretch a bit, get ready. But I don't play the guitar. I've done that at the sound check. I'm not one of those guys who starts noodling before he goes on. No, I'm set. This is the bit I'm getting ready. So I walk out on stage and pick up, get my guitar, and that's it. I don't want to hear about anything else. I just want to get on with the music. And it's not advice anybody else can take until they're ready to, or until they find it themselves. That somewhere in there, the other kind of show where people, are crazy and wild and wacky. They do crazy, wacky things, but I've noticed that my playing got very focused, and my presence got very focused on what I'm actually doing, not what it looks like, not what it feels like to, do this stuff. That's all a bit passé. It always has been with me. I don't fully understand showmanship. I mean, I was on the stage when Jimi Hendrix was burning his guitar, for goodness sake. I've seen, people break guitars on stage, horrible thing. So I don't think that really helps. I think what helps is musicians to be well focused, but also realize that if you're playing in a band, you are so dependent on everybody else. I mean, I might have done all right as a solo guitarist. A lot of people come out the bag and they've decided already that they're going to be solo guitarist, But I went through the group thing so much. And then only in 1975 did I really have the opportunity to record my first solo album, which was called Beginnings. And basically, I knew that was a point at which I would enjoy. And, I've done about 12, 13 studio solo albums, as well as other sorts of projects. But I think that what I was appreciating was the things I'd learned from other people. It wasn't me saying, oh, I'm a big head, I can make records without anybody. Because no, I still needed Bill Bruford or Alan White to play drums, And I worked with lots of people, even on my solo projects. There were a few that was just Dylan, my son Dylan Howe, on drums, and myself if I cover all the bass, but often I like to share, Tony Levin popped in on a few albums. Basically, the group thinking is still in my mind even when I'm playing a solo piece. I still understand that what I'm doing, I've benefited a lot from having some people skills to enable me to get on with people, because if you don't get on with people, you most probably won't get on with other musicians either, and that would be a tragedy. It would be a great loss to any musician if he can't connect properly with his other musicians. I've had some key people I've worked with, obviously John Anderson, John Wett, John Davison now. The singers are very important to me, and but also the musicians. When I walked in and auditioned with Yes, you know, Bruford was like, wow, this drummer. I mean, I must have been looking all my life for a guy like this, you know. So basically, working with a bass player like Chris was an education, because he didn't think like a bass player. He didn't just do roots, you know, he was moving about. So the whole sharing and arranging became much more interesting. I think, I mean, look, you've got the notes, you've got the performer, but the arrangement is actually the key thing. And that's what I spend a lot of time on my solo pieces, you know, even clap, you know, everything where I start isn't where I end up. You know, I start with something, and, you know, a tune I wrote recently, God, it most probably, I've been working on it for 3 years. That doesn't mean 3 years continuously, thank goodness. But over the course of many years, I'll develop a solo piece. It won't come all at once, because I've got to play it, you know. So if I've got these wacky ideas, I want to do this kind of thing, and it's going to go here, and it's going. But to play that well enough to record it will take a while, you know. It'll take a long while I'm composing it, if you like. While I'm composing it, I'm also perfecting how I want to play it and getting those things right. So comes back to writing. Arranging is really an extension of writing, because you can take somebody else's tune you didn't write and rearrange it, and that's as creative as you might be at that time.
I wasn't going to go here, but I would go here for just a second, if you will. You know, so Roundabout, for example, you know, when Jimi Hendrix popped on the scene, there was the world, and Wes Montgomery popped on the scene. Yeah. There was the world before them, yeah, and the world after them.
That's right.
And that tune, the first time I heard Roundabout, I went, excuse my expression, but what the F is that? Yeah. Because there's a tremendous amount of themes, a tremendous amount of movements. I mean, nobody in rock music did that. You talk about prog, it's way past what I would call prog. Yeah. I mean, it's classical, but it's rock, but it's got everything going on, and to get those guys together and to play it with the precision that you played it and record it, and yeah, you know, to this day I don't know of anything that's surpassed that.
Well, one of the things that really opened that up was the first time I said, I think I'll play some of this on an acoustic guitar. Now, normally an acoustic guitar strums in the background and adds a wonderful depth to the sound, or, you know, you play on your own. But basically, I was kind of like replacing my 175, or as it was at that time, ES Switchmaster, ES5 Switchmaster. I kind of took that out of the frame and put the folk guitar, the Martin 0018 folk guitar in the front, you know. And I thought, wow, this is risky. I don't know that anybody will know who it is playing, because I could start to feel that my electric playing had a certain style, but never had I stuck my neck out so much as to have Bruford, Squire, Rick Wakeman, John Anderson all playing, and all I'm doing is I'm playing the acoustic guitar, you know. It was adventurous, and the risk paid off. But what I'd like to say about the record overall is, by that time, Eddie and us had really, I mean, I was really in Eddie's camp, you know. I mean, him and I were like pretty close. I think he'd agree that often it was him and I going, okay, look, why don't we try this? We'll put that guitar back here, you know, we'll stick it in front, you know. There was a lot of empathy and enjoyment and adventurousness that him and I shared. So to get the sound, like when you hear Roundabout, that is a band who'd said, we want to be as tight as Booker T and the MGTs. Like, we want to be as tight as like James Brown's band, you know. Ooh, yeah. I mean, we had our thing. With tight meant in time, in tune, and gaps, air, you know, and there's a lot of air in Fragile. We didn't fill it all. Topographic, maybe we filled in a lot of air, but in Fragile, there was there was gaps in stuff that really hadn't been thought about. And that line, yes, was a guitar line, but you hear the organ play it more predominantly, but it's actually the guitar line, a bit like Close to the Edge, boom, boom, it was a guitar line. So I gave my lines to other people, you know, they picked them up and played them. And basically that meant that a song like Roundabout was definitely going to stand out. You know, it wasn't, you know, it was not going to go unnoticed with the opportunities we had, just because of the sheer tight arseness of that record. It's very, very tight, and I'm very proud of it.
Oh, it still stands up. It's played all over the world every day today. I started to talk about, just the eclecticism of your style, the Chet thing. You hear the Chet thing, you got the West thing going on, you got the classical thing going on. Of all the styles that you play in rock music, the rock style is the one that's the most missing, if you will,
Yeah.
I mean, would you agree? I mean,
but it's something that I think, yes, overlooks. I don't know how much I could have more impressed upon them that this was still fundamentally a rock band, even though we do a lot of jazzy, quasi-classical things with it. We still got to basically rock. And I think that rock element, you see, when you get to an album like Tomato, which I don't care for very much, it's got some great adventurism, but it doesn't kind of rock in that sense. When you get back to Drama, the next album, now then you hear, yes, that is definitely rock. And does it really happen to you? Tempest Fugue. See, we did pick it up. I mean, Trevor Horn and Jeff Downes were no fools. When they came into Yes, we'd been a trio for a little while on our own, Chris Allen and I, and we were rocking our asses off. I mean, we were definitely we were having a great time because there was a little bit too much of this arty-farty stuff. Yes, in there, particularly in Tomato. I don't know whether that's the biggest sufferance for me of that album. It's kind of like unusual, weird, but it isn't rock, enough. Although, Release has a fairly thunderous approach. I think that you're right to question that. We have to have that. That is a style that is greatly missed if it's not present.
It's a rock band. Yeah. Rock tunes, rock everything like that. And the guitars and the instruments that you choose to play are perfect.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Yeah, they're perfect. But stylistically, if you were to remove them, it's not the Marshall crank to 12 with a tube screamer in front of it, if you know what I mean. It's a different deal. And so the texture and the layering that's going on, and the arranging, to use your term, it's just freaking ridiculously good. It's just phenomenal. It's genius. I mean, I'll say it. It's genius.
So I'm always being asked, what's this? How's that? In the rock field. But I hope you've got a sensibility from me that the jazz guitar has been a really central role in my life, and certainly my listening pleasure is to fly off with a nice jazz guitar.
Listen, thank you so much. I really mean it. Thank you so much. This is Bob Baker with Steve Howe for Jazz Guitar Today. And man, I don't even know what to say. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Right. Thank you, Steve.
It's been my pleasure too.
It's been fun.
We'll talk to you again sometime in the future.
I hope we will. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.